Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. General Hospital Thursday, October 24 recap. Sam's or Goodbye Curtis strikes Heather deal with Steven. General Hospital, GH, spoilers recap for Thursday, October 24, reveals that Danny Morgan, Asher Antonisen, and Scout Quartermain, Cosette Abinanti, enjoyed breakfast out with Alexis Davis, Nancy Lee Grahn. So they all talked about what a wonderful thing Sam McCall, Kelly Monaco, was doing. In sunny Corinthos, Morris Bernard office, he got updates on Jason Morgan's, Steve Furton, whole Africa story, including the fact that Jen Sidwell, Carlo Rhoda, was still alive. Sonny thought doing business with Holly Sutton, Emma Sams, might be worth the trouble since they were talking about $100 million worth of stolen diamonds. Vengeful Sidwell could be a problem, but Sonny suggested maybe they could work fast so that Sidwell would never connect the dots. However, Sonny admitted he couldn't tackle this today and headed off to GH. Meanwhile, Carly Spencer, Laura Wright, blew off Jack Brennan's, Charles Mazur, attempt to meet up and headed to Sam's hospital room instead. That's where Carly offered anything Sam needed and thanked her for saving Lulu Spencer, Alexa Havens. Brennan eventually tracked Carly down and stressed the importance of Jason's cooperation now that Sidwell was in the United States. Carly called Jason over and asked him to help, so Jason filled Brennan in on Holly's stolen diamonds. Jason also warned Brennan not to hurt Carly since bad things tended to happen when people did. After Laura Collins, Jenny Francis, gave comatose Lulu a pep talk ahead of the transplant, Rocco Falconieri, Finn Kerr, gave his mom one as well. In the GH locker room, Lucas Jones, Van Hansis, was in a towel when he found Isaiah Gannon, Sawandi Wilson, concentrating with his eyes closed. Isaiah admitted he always envisioned his surgeries before they played out. Lucas acknowledged that every surgeon had their own rituals, and later found an Eckert's cinnamon roll in his locker. Brad Cooper, Perry Shen, popped up to confirm he put it there because he knew Lucas always had Eckert's before his surgeries. Lucas was annoyed over Brad overstepping boundaries, but Brad suggested he just wanted to help. There were some awkward moments when Lucas' towel slipped, but Brad acted like he'd seen it all before and mentioned the new mole Lucas should get checked out. Back with Isaiah, he met with Laura ahead of Lulu's surgery. Laura talked about how Lulu had always been a fighter and knew Isaiah could give her daughter the chance she needed to win again. At Pentonville, Rick Lansing, Rick Hurst, shocked Heather Weber, Allie Mills, with the news that the judge had vacated her sentence, so she was officially a free woman. Rick said Heather would need to find a job along with somewhere to stay. Heather wanted to crash with Laura or Alexis, but Rick shut down those ideas since they were both dealing with family stuff right now. At the hospital, Portia Robinson, Brooke Kerr, told Elizabeth Baldwin, Rebecca Herbst, about Curtis Ashford's Donald Turner cryptic plan to deal with Heather. Brad tooted his own horn about getting up early to buy baked goods for the staff, and then announced he was leaving early for the Woodchucks game. Liz seemed surprised over Brad bailing on his shift, but Portia had no objections due to Brad's leverage. After Lucas heard Brad manipulated his way to a lab tech position using Britt Westbourne's Kelly Thiebaud memory, he confronted Brad about it. Brad admitted he did drop Britt's name, so Lucas acknowledged Britt would have been happy about that. In Curtis' office, he welcomed Steven Weber, Scott Reeves, and called him Heather's prodigal son. Curtis had summoned Steven because he needed him to take Heather far away from Port Charles, and he was prepared to make it worth Steven's while. Steven wasn't sure he could convince Heather to leave because of Ace Cassadine, Jay, and Joey Clay, but Curtis made a prediction about Laura eventually cutting off access, and then Steven would be all Heather had left. Curtis hinted about getting Stephen's medical license reinstated and supplementing his income until he was on solid financial ground again. If Stephen didn't take Heather, Curtis insisted he'd have to resort to far less pleasant alternatives. Heather ultimately called Liz to come pick her up for Franco Baldwin's, Roger Howarth's, sake, so she showed up outside Pentonville as Heather was exiting. Stephen suddenly appeared, so Heather was thrilled at the sight of her son. Back at the hospital, Curtis assured Portia that the nightmare was over since he felt confident Stephen would indeed get Heather out of Port Charles. Meanwhile, Sam enjoyed one last visit with Alexis, Danny, Scout, Rocco, and Dante in her hospital room. There was plenty of talk about what a hero Sam was for helping Lulu. It was eventually time for Sam's procedure, so Dante gave her a kiss as everyone gathered for her pre-surgery goodbye. Laura, Rocco, Dante, Alexis, Danny, Scout, Sonny, and Carly were all there to show their support. Jason also showed up to say Sam's got this, so Sam replied that it was a piece of cake. Scout and Danny called out that they loved Sam, so she said she loved them as well while she was wheeled off to the OR. General Hospital spoilers say Sam's loved ones will have to deal with a crushing loss in the very near future, so stay tuned. In the October 24 episode of General Hospital, fans were left with a whirlwind of emotions as the hospital corridors bore witness to profound moments and unexpected alliances. As Port Charles' beloved Sam McCall said an emotional farewell in the operating room, a risky alliance unfolded as Curtis Ashford and Heather Weber sought out Stephen Lars for a deal, one that could either save them or mark their downfall. The episode opened with Sam, pale but resolved, lying in a hospital bed as the OR staff prepped for her surgery. Jason stood nearby, arms crossed and a mix of anxiety and sorrow playing across his face. He couldn't shake the gnawing sensation in his gut that this might be the last time he saw her. Sam's characteristic strength shone through as she assured him, "I'll be back, Jason. You know I've been through worse than this." But her gaze faltered momentarily, just enough to reveal a flicker of fear she tried to keep hidden. As they prepped her, Jason leaned in close. "You better fight like you always do. I'm not going to let you give up." Sam, with a gentle smile, placed a hand on his face, her touch lingering a bit too long. Her eyes, now glossy, held a depth of affection and sadness. She whispered, "If things don't go as planned, Jason, promise me you'll look after Danny and Scout." Jason swallowed, his jaw tightening. "No goodbyes, Sam. You're coming back to us." Meanwhile, Curtis Ashford, caught up in his own struggle for redemption, stood in General Hospital's corridors with a peculiar ally. Heather Weber, enigmatic and unpredictable as ever, had become something of a resource for Curtis. They weren't exactly partners, but Heather had been making veiled suggestions that she had something, or someone, that Curtis could use to get himself and his loved ones out of a rapidly worsening situation. Heather had an old contact who might help them, but there was a catch. That contact was her estranged son, Stephen Lars. Getting him involved, Heather claimed, could turn the tide for Curtis, but she'd need Curtis's help to pull it off. Despite his instincts screaming that this was the worst idea possible, Curtis was out of options. With his recent legal troubles and the constant danger that loomed over his family, he was willing to grasp at anything that might bring them a little peace. Curtis and Heather shared a brief look, one of both necessity and caution. "Stephen's not someone to cross," Heather warned. "But if you play this right, he can make things happen." "You're vouching for him?" Curtis asked warily. Heather's laugh was sharp and mirthless. "Oh, no, darling. I'd never vouch for Stephen. But I can tell you he has resources if you're willing to deal." Their path led them to a dimly lit conference room. Curtis had set up a meeting, the only place where he felt confident the walls didn't have ears. Soon enough, Stephen Lars entered, looking almost too calm for someone drawn into this shadowy meeting. His face bore the telltale signs of the years he'd spent away from Port Charles, and his reserved, almost cold demeanor was unnerving. The son of Heather Weber had learned to be guarded. "So you're Curtis Ashford?" Stephen asked, his tone bordering on indifferent. "And you're here with my mother, of all people. That alone should tell me enough." Curtis, taken aback by Stephen's bluntness, cut to the chase. "Listen, we don't need to like each other, but we do need something only you can help us with." Stephen folded his arms, leaning back slightly. "You'll have to be a lot more specific than that, Curtis. I don't make deals lightly." Heather piped in, feigning a motherly tone that was more patronizing than warm. "Oh, Stevie, now's not the time to get all self-righteous. Curtis here has been a little tangled up in some nasty business that's creeping closer to his family. He needs, let's call it an expert's assistance." Stephen's gaze flickered, sizing up Curtis and considering Heather's words. "Go on," he said, looking directly at Curtis. Curtis shifted uneasily. "I need help pulling together intel on a group that's been targeting me and those around me. They're meticulous and well-connected. Rumor has it you've had dealings in areas the PCPD can't reach. Help me get leverage, or at least some leads. I know it's not exactly a safe request, but I don't have any other options." Stephen smirked. "And you thought coming to Heather and me was a good one? You're a braver man than I thought, Curtis." But there was something in Stephen's expression that suggested he was considering it. In fact, a spark of intrigue danced in his eyes. Maybe Stephen was interested in stirring the pot in Port Charles. Maybe he saw an opportunity to exercise his own quiet power, or maybe he simply liked the idea of complicating things for his own mother. Whatever his reasoning, Stephen agreed to listen further. As the deal slowly started to take shape, the scene shifted back to the OR, where Sam's surgery had officially begun. As Jason waited outside, his gaze unfocused and restless, he was soon joined by Carly, who had come to support him. "She's strong, Jason," Carly said softly. "If anyone can pull through, it's Sam." Jason nodded, but said nothing. His mind flashed to memories of the countless times Sam had saved him, and the many times he'd done the same for her. But this time felt different. There was an air of finality hanging over them both that he couldn't shake. Carly squeezed his shoulder, understanding that Jason's silence spoke volumes. Inside the OR, the operation was progressing, but Sam's vitals began to fluctuate. The medical staff quickly took note, working to stabilize her, but Sam drifted in and out of consciousness, memories of her life flashing before her. Her children's faces, moments of laughter with Jason, and the love she shared with her family appeared in fragmented images. Back in the conference room, the meeting between Curtis, Heather, and Stephen took a chilling turn. As Curtis laid out his plight, Stephen's face darkened. "I'll help you, but on one condition. You never mention my involvement to anyone. This arrangement stays between the three of us." Curtis agreed. But something about Stephen's demeanor made Curtis uneasy. The man was as enigmatic as he was calculating. Heather, meanwhile, appeared almost thrilled by the deal. Curtis couldn't shake the feeling that he was sealing himself into a pact that might come back to haunt him. As they shook on their agreement, Curtis hoped it would be enough to protect his family. But Heather had an unreadable expression, and Stephen looked all too satisfied for Curtis's comfort. Back in the OR, Sam's vitals began to stabilize, and the surgeon breathed a sigh of relief as they finished the procedure. Soon, Sam was wheeled into recovery, and Jason was finally allowed to see her. Relief washed over his face as he took her hand, watching as her eyes fluttered open, and a soft smile crossed her lips. Told you I'd fight, she whispered, her voice weak but steady. Jason leaned down, brushing a kiss against her forehead. You always do, he murmured, his own voice thick with emotion. As the episode closed, Curtis stood in the shadows outside General Hospital, replaying his uneasy alliance in his mind. He knew he was treading on thin ice, but if Stephen Lars's resources could provide him the edge he needed, he would take the risk. In Port Charles, where secrets ran deep and trust was a rarity, Curtis knew he'd just signed onto a pact that might change everything. As the credits rolled, viewers were left with a sense of dread and anticipation, wondering how these uneasy alliances and risky decisions would ripple through Port Charles in the episodes to come.